When I look back on those years, it feels as though I'm peering through a fogged window, shapes and colors still visible but blurred at the edges, distorted by the condensation of memory. There is one story in particular that never leaves me, no matter how hard I try to bury it under the routines of daily life. It's a story of love and betrayal, of desire and denial, and of a woman who both saved and ruined me. Her name was Claire. I wasn't new to romance when I met her. I'd had my share of flings, of women who came and went like seasons, some warm and fleeting, some cold and unforgettable. But Claire was different. She didn't walk into a room so much as command it. People gravitated toward her as though she carried some secret magnetism. And yet, behind her easy smile and sharp wit, there was something guarded in her eyes, like a shutter pulled halfway down. She spoke about life with a kind of practiced detachment, as if she had already seen every ending and none of them surprised her anymore. That paradox drew me in, her openness and her distance, both at once. We met through work, forced into late nights hunched over spreadsheets and coffee cups that never seemed to empty. At first, we shared laughter as colleagues do, easing the monotony of deadlines. But slowly, imperceptibly, the boundaries blurred. A glance held too long, a hand brushing against mine as she passed me a file, the charged silence when our eyes met after some offhand joke. It was like stepping closer to a fire, not close enough to burn, but enough to feel the heat seeping through the air. There was one problem, though. Claire wasn't free. She lived with someone, a man she mentioned casually in conversations, though never with warmth. When she spoke his name, it was like mentioning the weather, factual, unremarkable, stripped of affection. I told myself that meant something, that maybe she was already halfway gone, that I could be the one to give her what she secretly longed for. Desire makes optimists out of fools, and I was both. It started one evening after a particularly grueling day. We went for drinks, telling ourselves it was to celebrate finishing a project. One drink turned to two, then three, and by the time the bar closed, we were leaning into each other, laughing as though the world outside had ceased to exist. When she finally kissed me in the shadow of a deserted street, her lips trembling against mine, I felt something dangerous awaken inside me. I knew it was wrong, knew we were stepping onto ground that would never hold our weight, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. From there, our affair took root. At first, it was stolen hours and whispered phone calls, each meeting pulsing with secrecy and hunger. Hotel rooms became our sanctuary, places where the rules of her other life didn't exist. Every kiss felt like a confession, every touch an act of rebellion. She told me she felt alive with me in ways she hadn't in years, that I made her remember who she was before responsibility and routine had dulled her edges. I believed her because I needed to believe her. But love built in shadows doesn't thrive in light. One morning we dared to meet for coffee in public, sitting across from each other in a quiet cafe. I noticed how stiff she was, how her laughter sounded rehearsed, her eyes darting toward the door every time someone walked in. In that moment, I saw the truth I had been avoiding. I wasn't her partner. I was her secret, a burden she carried with equal parts exhilaration and dread. And yet, when I tried to pull away, she drew me back with words that pierced deeper than any blade. She spoke of her unhappiness, of dreams she had buried, of how I was the only person who truly saw her. There were nights she lay in my arms, whispering that she couldn't imagine life without me, and I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. But the cracks began to show. I found myself lying more easily, making excuses to friends and family, hiding not just her but the parts of myself that were changing. My reflection in the mirror looked the same, but I felt hollowed out, as though I were living two lives and failing at both. Still, I told myself it was worth it, that all great love stories came with sacrifice. The moment that still haunts me happened one rainy November night. We stumbled out of a bar, laughing, our clothes damp with mist, and she kissed me on a street corner. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to slow, the headlights on wet pavement, the city humming around us, her lips pressed desperately to mine. I thought maybe this was proof that we could survive the storm. But then her phone rang. She froze, pulled back, and answered in a voice I barely recognized. Soft, practiced, tender. "Yes, I'll be home soon," she said, her smile faltering as her eyes avoided mine. That night, as I lay awake replaying it all, a realization settled in like a stone in my chest. I wasn't in love with Claire. I was in love with the illusion of her. And illusions, I would soon learn, have a way of breaking into pieces sharper than glass. After that November night, something inside me shifted, though I tried to pretend otherwise. I kept telling myself it was only a stumble, a moment when reality leaked into our little world of secrecy. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and doubt, once it takes root, is relentless. Every time Claire smiled at me, I wondered who else she smiled for. Every time her phone buzzed, I imagined whose name was lighting her screen. Still, I clung to her. I told myself that if I could just be patient, she would leave him and we would finally have a life free of shadows. She said the words I wanted to hear. Soon, I promise, just a little more time. Those promises were lifelines tossed into a storm, fraying as soon as I tried to grasp them. But I held on anyway, because hope, no matter how flimsy, is addictive. Then came the night I drove past her apartment. I hadn't planned it. I was restless, anxious, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. I told myself I just wanted to see the lights in her window, to feel close to her even if we weren't together. But when I parked on the street below, what I saw gutted me. Through the glass, I glimpsed Claire and her boyfriend at the dinner table, laughing, his hand covering hers. The intimacy was casual, practiced, not strained the way she had described. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I had convinced myself I was her refuge, her only source of joy, but there she was, at ease in the life she swore was suffocating her. I drove away, my chest tight, my hands trembling on the wheel. The betrayal wasn't just that she was still with him. It was that she had made me believe I was irreplaceable, when clearly I was. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I buried it, wore a mask when we were together, let the anger fester in silence. The next time we met, she was all softness, confessing how trapped she felt, how I was the only one who truly understood her. She kissed me with such urgency that for a moment I doubted what I had seen. Maybe she was pretending with him. Maybe I was the real thing. That's the cruelty of betrayal. It makes you question not just them, but yourself. But my mask cracked eventually. One night, lying tangled in her sheets, I asked her directly, "Do you love him?" The pause that followed was endless. She didn't meet my eyes. "It's complicated," she whispered. Those two words cut deeper than any admission. Complicated. That was her shield, her excuse, the veil she draped over every lie. In that moment, I saw her clearly, not as a woman torn between two men, but as someone who had learned to survive by keeping pieces of herself hidden. And I was just one more secret in her collection. Still, I couldn't walk away. I told myself she needed me, that if I gave up, I'd be abandoning her to a life of quiet misery. But the truth was uglier. I couldn't bear the thought of losing her, even if keeping her meant losing myself. The second fracture came by accident. One afternoon, she left her laptop open while she showered. I told myself I wasn't going to look, but temptation whispered otherwise. Her inbox was open, and before I could stop myself, my eyes locked on a string of emails from her boyfriend. They were full of tenderness, inside jokes, plans for the future, even a vacation they were booking together. My stomach churned as I read her replies. Affectionate, devoted, unrecognizable from the Claire who told me she felt suffocated. When she emerged from the bathroom, smiling, wrapped in a towel, I forced a smile back, but inside something snapped. I didn't confront her, not then. Instead, I began testing her, probing for cracks. I invited her to meet my friends, but she declined. I suggested we plan a trip, but she dodged. Every question was met with a careful half-answer, every opportunity for truth sidestepped with grace. I realized then that secrecy wasn't a burden for her. It was her comfort zone. She thrived in half-light, where nothing had to be whole or honest. And I was enabling it, feeding it, because I couldn't let go. The breaking point came at the holiday market. We walked through the crowds, lights glowing like captured stars, her hand clasped tightly in mine. For a brief moment it felt almost normal, two lovers wrapped in the magic of winter. But then she saw someone she recognized, a man from her work or perhaps a friend of her boyfriend. Without hesitation, she dropped my hand and stepped away, pretending to browse a stall. The sting of that gesture seared into me. In one swift motion, she had turned me from partner to liability. I left without saying goodbye, my chest hollow, my footsteps carrying me away before my mind could catch up. Later that night she called, her voice frantic, apologizing, saying she had panicked. But I knew the truth now. I wasn't her freedom, I was her secret. And secrets aren't meant to be cherished, they're meant to be hidden. After the holiday market, something in me hardened. I still answered her calls, still met her when she asked, but I carried a new kind of distance inside me. It was like watching a fire from behind glass, still beautiful, still dangerous, but no longer touching my skin. Claire noticed. She became more tender, more insistent, as though she could sense the wall I was quietly building. But her tenderness felt rehearsed, a performance tailored to soothe me. Every kiss, every whispered, "I need you," was haunted by the echo of her hand slipping out of mine in that crowd. I tried to convince myself I was in control now, that I could end things on my terms. But the truth was, I was still addicted to her. Addiction isn't about joy, it's about compulsion, about returning again and again to something that wounds you because the wound has become part of you. That was Claire for me. Every time I tried to pull away, she reeled me back in with a glance, a word, a tear sliding down her cheek. The real unraveling began one night in her apartment. For the first time, she invited me into the home she shared with him, claiming he was away on business. I should have refused. Instead, I stepped inside and immediately felt like an intruder. His shoes lined neatly by the door, his books stacked on the shelf, photographs of their smiles frozen in frames. She moved through the space with practiced ease, cooking for me, pouring wine, pretending it was ours. But I couldn't shake the ghost of the man who lived there, the man who believed her loyalty was his. As we lay in her bed, surrounded by his scent, I asked again, "When are you leaving him?" She turned away, staring at the ceiling. "You don't understand, he needs me." Her words cut deeper than any lie. What about me? What about the nights I lay awake, drowning in secrecy, twisting myself into knots to fit into the narrow space she allowed me? I wanted to scream, to demand she choose. But I didn't. Instead, I held her, even as something inside me broke. Weeks passed in cycles of confrontation and reconciliation. I tried twice to end it, convinced I could no longer survive as her hidden shadow. Each time she appeared at my door with tear-streaked cheeks, begging me not to abandon her. And each time I gave in. Love, or what I mistook for love, made me weak. Then came the night that shattered every illusion. Claire had fallen asleep beside me, her breathing steady, her arm draped across my chest. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I told myself not to look, but temptation wore me down. One message lit the screen. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." The name was Daniel, not her boyfriend, not me, someone else. The world seemed to tilt. I scrolled through thread after thread, my chest tightening with each word. She had been weaving the same story for him that she had for me: intimacy, passion, promises whispered in the dark. My hands shook as I held the phone, the realization crashing down. I wasn't her escape, her salvation, her chosen one. I was just another audience member in her theater of lies. I sat there in silence, staring at her sleeping face, feeling rage and shame coil together in my gut. Rage at her duplicity, shame at my own blindness. I had told myself I was different, that what we had was singular, irreplaceable. But I was nothing more than another pawn on her board. When she stirred awake and reached for me, I pulled away. Her eyes narrowed instantly. She knew something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked, her voice edged with caution. "Who is Daniel?" I said. My voice was steady, but inside I was shaking. The silence that followed confirmed everything. She didn't ask who I meant, didn't feign confusion. She just stared at me, her face pale, her lips parting without sound. For the first time, the glass wall around her shattered, and I saw the truth. This wasn't an accident, a mistake, or a moment of weakness. It was who she was. Betrayal wasn't something that happened around her. It was something she cultivated, carried, breathed. I left that night without another word. She called, she texted, she even came to my door, but I couldn't face her. Each time her name lit up my phone, I felt the familiar ache, the longing that should have died with her lies. But it didn't. Love doesn't vanish cleanly. It lingers, clings, even when it's poisoned. And yet, as much as I longed for her, I knew something fundamental had ended. Not just our affair, but the version of myself that had believed love could justify anything. That man was gone. What remained was harder, colder, and perhaps wiser. Still, the wound was fresh and the ache was constant. I had thought betrayal was a single act, a clean cut. I hadn't realized it could be layered, a labyrinth where every corner revealed another blade. Claire had built that labyrinth, and I had wandered into it willingly. Now I had to find a way out. Walking away should have been the end. I told myself that countless times in the weeks that followed. I deleted her number, blocked her messages, threw out the sweater she had left at my place that still smelled faintly of her perfume. But memory is a stubborn parasite. It lingered in songs that came on the radio, in the taste of red wine, in the first sting of winter air. She was everywhere, even in her absence. I started drinking more, just enough to blur the edges of the ache. My friends noticed the change but didn't press. They had never liked her, though most of them never knew the full truth. How could I tell them? To admit what I had been part of felt like confessing to a crime. It wasn't just shame, it was exposure, the raw fear of being seen as weak, foolish, desperate. And then she came back, not in person at first. A letter slipped under my door one morning, her handwriting unmistakable. I stared at the envelope for hours before tearing it open. Inside, she wrote of regret, of confusion, of how much she missed me. She begged me to meet her one last time, for closure. That word should have been a warning, but instead it stirred the same old ache. Closure was a promise I had never been granted, and part of me still craved it. I agreed. We met at a cafe on the edge of town, one we had never visited together before. She wore her hair differently, straighter, as if trying to present a new version of herself. But when her eyes met mine, I saw the same storm behind them. She cried before she even spoke, and I hated how quickly my resolve crumbled at the sight. She swore Daniel was nothing, a mistake born of loneliness and confusion. She said her boyfriend was still clinging to her, but that I was the one she loved, truly loved. I wanted to believe her, even as every part of me screamed not to. Betrayal had taught me to doubt, but desire had taught me to forgive. And forgiveness, I realized, can be more dangerous than hatred. We fell back into each other as though the break had never happened. Nights tangled in sheets, stolen afternoons, promises whispered once more. But this time I watched her differently. Every glance at her phone, every unexplained absence, every shift in her tone, I logged it, analyzed it, weighed it like evidence in a trial. I was no longer just a lover. I was a detective in my own ruin. The final twist came on a night thick with rain. She had invited me over, claiming her boyfriend was away again. But as we lay together afterward, I heard the unmistakable sound of keys in the door. Panic surged through me, but Claire remained calm, almost unnervingly so. She pushed me toward the balcony, whispering urgently, "Go now." I stumbled into the night air, barefoot, half-dressed, my heart pounding. From the shadows, I watched as a man entered the apartment. He wasn't the boyfriend I had glimpsed in photos. He was older, heavier, carrying himself with the authority of someone who belonged there. He kissed her as if nothing were amiss, as if I hadn't just been tangled in her sheets minutes before. The realization hit me like a blow. There wasn't just one man or two. There were layers I hadn't even begun to fathom. I wasn't her secret life. I was one of many, each carefully compartmentalized, each believing he was the exception. I left soaked, humiliated, and strangely hollow. The anger that had once burned inside me was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. She wasn't simply unfaithful. She was addicted to duplicity itself, weaving webs around herself until no one could tell where the lies ended and the truth began. The next day she called, begging me not to give up, promising explanations, swearing I was still the one she needed. But her words had lost their power. For the first time, I saw them not as lifelines but as chains. I didn't answer, not then, not ever again. But silence is not the same as peace. Nights stretched long and restless. I replayed every moment, dissected every word, wondering how I had missed the signs. The truth is, I hadn't missed them, I had ignored them. Because love, when poisoned by obsession, makes accomplices of us all. And yet, even in my resolve to end it, I couldn't deny the pull. The human heart is a cruel machine, capable of craving the very thing that destroys it. I told myself I was free, but in quiet moments when the world fell silent, I still heard her laugh, still felt the echo of her touch. It was then I realized, leaving her was only the beginning. Surviving her would take far longer. Time has a way of softening wounds, or at least covering them with scar tissue. In the months after I severed contact with Claire, life took on a dull steadiness. I went to work, I met friends for drinks, I pretended to be whole. On the surface, I looked like a man who had survived something messy but ordinary. But inside, I carried the weight of it like a stone lodged in my chest. The hardest part wasn't her lies. It wasn't even the betrayals themselves, stacked one on top of another like cruel bricks. It was me, what I had allowed myself to become. A man who had bartered away his dignity for the fleeting warmth of her smile. A man who had ignored every red flag, every warning, because the addiction was stronger than reason. That knowledge was its own kind of betrayal, one I couldn't blame on anyone but myself. I tried dating again, tentatively, cautiously. But each time I sat across from someone new, I felt the ghost of Claire hovering between us. I measured their words against hers, searching for cracks, waiting for the inevitable lie. It wasn't fair to them and it wasn't fair to me. Trust, once shattered, doesn't grow back easily. It limps, it hesitates, it second-guesses every step. One evening, months later, I saw her again, not by choice. I was walking through the city and there she was sitting outside a restaurant, laughing with yet another man. She hadn't noticed me. For a moment I froze, watching the way she tilted her head, the way she touched his arm lightly, the way she wove the same spell I had once believed was mine alone. My chest tightened, not with longing this time, but with something closer to recognition. She hadn't changed, and maybe she never would. I walked on without saying a word. That night I poured myself a drink and sat in the quiet of my apartment reflecting. What had I learned from all of it? That love can be poisonous, that desire can blind, that betrayal can come not once but in waves, each sharper than the last. But also this: survival is possible. The heart doesn't heal by forgetting, but by learning to carry the memory without letting it define you. I won't pretend I emerged unscathed. There are nights even now, years later, when I dream of her, when I wake with the taste of her name still on my tongue. There are moments when I see her reflection in strangers on the street, when I wonder if some part of me will always belong to her. But then I remind myself, belonging and surrender are not the same. She no longer owns me. What haunts me most isn't her betrayal. It's the question of why I stayed so long, why I accepted so little when I had so much to give. The answer is simple, though painful, because I wanted to believe. Belief is a dangerous thing. It can build nations, topple empires, and in the quiet of a single bedroom, it can ruin a man. If you ask me now whether I regret it, I wouldn't give you a simple yes or no. Regret is too clean a word for something so tangled. That chapter of my life broke me, yes, but it also forced me to confront truths I had avoided for years. It taught me the cost of self-deception, the fragility of trust, and the depth of human hunger for connection, even at the price of our own undoing. Claire remains a ghost in my story, a figure I revisit not with fondness, but with a strange, reluctant respect. She was chaos incarnate, and I was the fool who mistook chaos for passion. But she revealed something about me I might never have learned otherwise, that I am capable of surviving even my own worst mistakes. And that, perhaps, is the closest thing to redemption I will ever find. I tell you all this not to elicit pity, nor to vilify her, though she earned more than her share of condemnation. I tell it because stories matter, because someone out there might be sitting where I once sat, tangled in secrecy, mistaking obsession for love, confusing betrayal for complexity. To that person, I would say this: listen to the part of you that whispers when everything else screams. The whispers are the truth. Don't ignore them the way I did. As for me, I live quietly now. I keep my circle small, my nights calm, my mornings steady. I don't chase storms anymore. Sometimes, when the air smells of rain, I think of her, of balconies and hurried whispers, of letters slipped under doors. I think of the boy I was and the man I've become. And then I take a breath, close my eyes, and let the memory pass like weather. Because that's all she is now. Weather. A storm I walked through and survived. And survival, I've learned, is its own kind of love story, one you write for yourself after all the others have ended.